we believe that books change lives. Books change the lives not only of the author, because it forces you to crystallize what you believe, also obviously of all the readers. So we always talk about leveraged impact, believing that, hey, a book is this way to impact a huge amount of people, and you do work once, and then that book goes on to do work for you. And so in the context of using a book to grow your business, which is something I'm super passionate about, we use books to get more leads, sales, and referrals.
This is Coach U, where we learn directly from the experts, step by step, how they achieved a particular result.
Welcome everybody on today's show of Coach U, where we're helping all of you guys learn from the experts, step by step how to. We have an amazing friend of mine. I've known him for many years. He's the author of Published, which is one of my favorite books. You should read it. He's the author of 6 best-selling books. He runs self-publishing school. He's been on stages countless number of times. He's employed friends that are young adults and other people to be able to build their brand through a step-by-step process. Welcome, Chandler Bolt.
Hey, great to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Dennis.
Dude, it is an absolute pleasure to be able to learn from the guy who, when I think I first saw you, was it 3 years ago at Content Marketing Conference?
Something like that. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Yep.
And you had everyone all like yellowed out because that was sort of like the theme color you had. And I thought, man, this guy, Chandler Bolt, he's like a lightning bolt. He's like a bolt going on. And there are so many people that were around you that I thought, man, I'm never going to get a chance to come up and say hi to this guy. Because even you guys had a booth there and you had all these other people, who were working at your booth. And so I came by, you might not have noticed because you had so many people around you, but I came by a few times and I thought, okay, now's my chance because it's during one of the breaks, but there's still people there. So like each time, like, dang it, there's like a line of people talking to Chandler Bolt. But now I actually get a chance to talk to Chandler Bolt, which is amazing.
Oh man, well, I'm glad to be here, man. And I love what you guys are doing.
Awesome. So I prepared some questions for you and here we go. So you've got the mega trend of lots of people that are now publishing their book, where it's like a new business card, right? Everyone's got their book.
Yep.
How does someone stand out as an authority versus all the other people that might be telling their story or being a supposed expert in a particular topic?
Yeah. And I love that you asked that question because I think for a lot of people, that's the chicken or the egg question, right? And there's a million things that you could do. It's just a matter of what should you do. And so I feel like, you've got your message and then there's the mechanism. And so for me, I feel like a lot of people, you feel like you have this message that you want to share, that you need to share, that you feel compelled to share, that will help people. And then there's different mechanisms that you can choose. And for me, it just so happened to be a book, which was kind of unlikely because, I'm a C-level English student and a college dropout. So I did not like writing. I was not good at it, but for me, it was like the message is bigger than the mechanism.
Yeah.
So even though I might not enjoy this thing, I think this is going to be a great way to help people. And so for a lot of people that we work with, writing and publishing a book is the first step towards building authority. It is kind of like planting your flag and saying, hey, this is what I believe. This is a methodology that I've learned. This is how you can do it as well. So it's going through that process and it's doing it. And so that we believe that books change lives and that, books change the lives not only of the author, because it forces you to crystallize what you believe.
Yeah.
Also, obviously, of all the readers. So we always talk about leveraged impact.
Yeah.
And that's something that's really near and dear to my heart. And so just believing that, hey, a book is this way to impact a huge amount of people, and you do work once, and then that book goes on to do work for you. And so in the context of using a book to grow your business, which is something I'm super passionate about, we use books to get more leads, sales, and referrals.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how do you use a book as the starting point of a conversation? And specific to building authority, it's all right, you've got the book. Now, how do we leverage the book to get podcast interviews, to get media, PR, to get speaking, to get and I think that just blends nicely with a lot of the stuff that you guys teach.
Yeah, that is fantastic. And then the magic of having this book in my hands, it took me 2 flights to complete it. Most books are a 1 flight, like a New York, LA kind of flight, but I needed 2, not because it was difficult or because it was long, but because I had to stop and take notes and think, wow, I really need to consider that process and all the different steps of planning before I launch, or how I organize, or how I write, or how, like all these things. It's incredible. And getting something like this I found was way more powerful than a podcast or a blog post or a webinar or something like that. So there's magic in the book you have.
Because it's a process, right? It's the same reason why for me personally, I prioritize reading books as my main mechanism of learning. So like, you know, because I think it's wealth. You know, I feel like as an engineer, you'll appreciate this, or I guess recovering engineer. But it's like, it's this formulaic thing, right? Like people always talk about how do I find a mentor or how do I get a mentor? Well, the smartest, most successful people on the planet have taken years to crystallize the best things that they learn into a book. And for $15 and a few hours of your life, you can learn from them. I call it a $15 mentor, right? It's like, so there's these $15 mentors everywhere, and all you have to do is buy the book and read the book. And so like, but it's like you said, it's a formulaic process. And so that's why for me, anytime I'm trying to tackle a new subject or learn, it's books and audiobooks is like the primary mechanism of learning.
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't pay $15 to know everything inside Chandler Bolt's head, or to have a call Chandler Bolt?
Oh man,
what a steal! So you mentioned that you were a C English student, writing kind of person. What do you say to people who maybe they're better on video as opposed to writing and creating a book, or maybe it could be a course?
Yeah, so there's, you know, kind of break this into two parts. So I think there's, first, it's like, which the chicken or the egg, like, do I do the course first or do I do the book first?
Yeah.
And I'll say, like, there's no definitive brushstroke answer, one size fits all. It kind of really depends, but I'll just say, like, what worked for me is doing the book first. So I did the book and I used that book and turned it into a course. And the book was the 10,000 foot view. And then I, you know, built on that. And I know I was interviewing Ruth Soukup on the Self-Publishing School podcast the other day, and she wrote a book called How to Blog for Profit. That book sold about 500,000 copies, self-published. And then she turned that into Elite Blogging Academy, which is course-based business, right? So I know what worked well for me and what worked well for her is doing a book first, and I've seen that, but it is kind of chicken or the egg. But then, okay, well, what if I'm someone who writing is not my primary mechanism of content delivery, right? So if that's the case, then you know, I'd say choose your own adventure, right? So there's some people write better than you. We work with two types of people. One type of people, they write better than they speak, and so they say, okay, perfect, do that. The other type is they speak better than they write. And it's okay, perfect, do that. Either way, the same fundamentals. Like, you're going to create a mind map for the book. You're going to turn that mind map into an outline, and then, you know, that per chapter outline, you're going to do the same thing. Start with chapter 1, create a mind map for the chapter, turn that mind map into an outline. And then you either write the chapter 45 minutes to an hour and a half, or you speak the chapter 10 minutes and you repeat that process chapter by chapter by chapter. So I would say play to your strengths. And if you write better than you speak, do that. If you speak better than you write, do that.
Okay. And let's say that we start with a book and then we want to do a course. How do we transition that smoothly? Do we take the chapters and then create exercises based on them?
Yeah. And so this is something we've started talking more and more about. We kind of built out this program called Course Building for Authors. And it's like, how do you turn the book into a course? And what's funny is people try to reinvent the wheel. And they're like, okay, cool, start from scratch. Like, all right, let's create the course curriculum. And it's like, no, you already created the course curriculum. Like, that is your outline for your book. Like, you decided the order in which you should teach someone something. So now you're going to build on exactly that, except you're just going to expand. Because if the book is the 10,000 foot view, the online course is in the weeds. And so, you know, I think so many people think, well, like, oh, well, wait, I'm just going to teach them more of the stuff I taught them in the book. Why would they want to pay for that? Like, I think there's mental roadblocks, but my philosophy has always been, if you give away all of your best stuff for free, people will pay you to tell it to them again. And so people read the book, and a lot of times, just like you were saying, Dennis, is like, they'll see me speak at an event. We'll give away these books like they're candy. I mean, pass out tons of them, and then people read it on the flight home. They book a call with my team. They sign up for Self-Publishing School. So like, it works, and that's the process. And then the last thing I would say, if you want to turn your book into a course, is sell then build. Sell then build. So I really screwed this up in the beginning. is I built a program that nobody wanted. It was something else, but I built it. You know, it's like when you don't talk to customers and you don't get people to vote with their wallet, then you build something that no one wants. But if you sell it, then build it, you're going to not only validate the idea, but you're also going to have happier customers. And so for every course that we launch, we do a beta, and it's kind of like people know now in our community, they're like, if you hear about a beta, you get in on the beta, because it'll be the best price it'll ever be. It'll be the highest, like the highest touch, most coaching, like all that stuff. And then we give them access to like lifetime access to the content, but we keep upgrading it. So it's like but it's a win-win, because they get that amazing experience at a ridiculously low price. And then we get a ton of feedback. A ton of feedback and really great testimonials, so that like right now we're like in the final couple weeks of our beta program for PR and speaking for authors, and next week we're launching it evergreen at the time of recording this episode. And you know that like we've already got testimonials, we've already got proof of concept. We changed the content a lot, because you get students going through the curriculum and you're like, oh wow, we totally missed the mark on this and this. This really hit home. Okay, so let's do a little bit more of this. Let's move this here, move that there. Like you just start optimizing and improving the whole thing, and then it makes for a better student experience, happier students, and better results.
I love that. Sell before you build. Now, what if someone doesn't have an audience like you do? How do they go about getting that feedback and selling?
Yeah, great question. So, you know, that's why personally I recommend the book first, because I use the book to build the audience. But either way, like, you know, my results are certainly not typical. Like my first book, we built a 4,000 person email list off that book, and we had nothing to sell. And so it was like this weird thing where most people have something to sell and no email list. We had an email list and nothing to sell. Like, all right, we got to figure this out. There's people on this email list. But that's certainly the exception, not the rule. But I would say like the book is the Trojan horse that like builds a lot of that, at least for me personally. But then there's just scrappy guerrilla marketing. And so, you know, a lot of what we did is we hosted free trainings, and then I would DM Facebook friends and just say, hey, I'm hosting this training. Can you please share this with people you know that might get value from it and might be thinking about writing a book? And then I had a couple key strategic partners that believed in me early on. And I said, hey, you know, if you can send some people to this webinar, I'll give you an affiliate commission. And I don't know if this is going to work. Like, I don't know if it's going to convert well and you'll make a ton of money. But what I do know is that like, I'm going to knock their socks off with value. So like worst case scenario, you send them to this webinar, they're going to love it, and they'll love you for sending them to it. And then fingers crossed that this will do well and you'll make money if that's the case. And so I just had a couple personal relationships and people that I'm very fortunate that believed in me and did that. I don't think I've ever shouted them out for this, but it was Jamie Tardy, now known Jamie Masters of the Eventual Millionaire.
Amazing.
I think it was her and James Schramko.
Okay, yeah.
And it was just, and maybe Hollis Carter, but it was like, I will forever owe them, because they're just like, hey, I like you, I trust you, like, let's give this a try. And it was amazing. And so I mean, there's a few lessons in there. Look for strategic partners, guerrilla marketing. I think a lot of what you guys teach, like if you do it the right way, paid media can work well, but do it the right way and do it strategically. So do it the way that you guys teach. And then the book, like that, I think is what, because now, I mean, for us, for sure, like we spend a lot of money on Facebook ads and, and ads in general. And there's paid media, there's earned media, there's content marketing, there's all that stuff. But in the early days, it's a little bit more scrappy.
Well, you got the wheel rolling now, so you can reinvest.
100%.
Great.
100%.
Now, some people, they don't have the expertise like you have. Maybe they're more relationship oriented. So we find that people are one way or the other. What do you say to people who say, I'm not a real pro in a particular area, but I know a lot of people and I can maybe interview them and cull their knowledge? So like the relationship angle versus the expert angle.
Yeah. One of my favorite things on this is, I was in Boy Scouts growing up, and my troop leader, he always joked. He's like, if we're out camping, and you see a bear, you don't have to be faster than the bear. You just have to be faster than your friend. Right. And I think that applies to this. And it's something we've always talked about is like, you don't have to know everything. You just have to know more than the person that you're teaching. And so I think 70, 80, 90% of the people that end up in this, you know, that think this is the problem, they actually know more about a subject than a vast majority of people. And so it's just finding that subject. And so I think there's, you know, I think there's the, there's two ways of going about it, but I think it's like, hey, what's that thing that you do that, you know, that if pretty much all of us are knowledge workers, right? We get paid for what's in our head, either running a business, doing a job, any of those things. So if I were to go try to do what you do today, there would be the gap, right? There's this gap between what I know on day one and what you know from years, maybe even in some cases, decades of experience. And in that gap is often the best book. And it's often the things that you overlook. It's the broken record conversations that you say over and over and over again, or it's the throwaway thing that you're like, yeah, I'm not really that good at that because everybody's good at that, right? Yeah. And so I think there's that, and I think there's what you're talking about, which is pulling together expertise and being that relationship builder, that conduit, that okay, I'm going to add value by bringing together resources, bringing together ideas, bringing together people in a way that will be helpful for others.
Yeah. So Chandler, do you know how to, or how do you tell when it's imposter syndrome versus someone actually doesn't know enough to write a book yet? Or do you ever tell someone, you know what,
oh, man.
I think your stuff sucks. I mean, you just shouldn't write a book.
Yeah. Very rarely. And so there's just be sometimes where it's like, okay, cool. That's not a good idea. But I mean, the difference between imposter syndrome, I think, and the other side is like, I think most of the time it is imposter syndrome because it's this feeling of like, I'm not enough, or this feeling that I haven't learned enough or whatever. And so it's like, I think it's really speaking to people to give themselves permission to speak on this thing. And I would go back to the bear analogy of like, okay, is there a handful of people that you know more than them on this topic? The answer is probably yes. And then you can teach on that thing. Or like you were saying, it's like, even if you're just a conduit for learning, you that can add a lot of value. And so I think it is something that people struggle with all the time. But one thing that was like really helpful for me, a friend kind of challenged me on this. He said, Chandler, do you think everyone should write a book? I said, no. and he said, why? And he said, could you imagine having your grandfather or your grandmother or your great grandmother's book? Like, could you imagine? I'm like, yeah, I don't like, everyone always talks about how awesome my grandpa was. I don't know hardly anything about him. I'm like, imagine if I would have got his, 60 something years of life distilled into a book. Like, how powerful would that be? So I think at the end of the day, for a lot of people, it's, if nothing else, like, can you pass this to your kids? Can you pass this to your grandkids? Can this be something that lives past you? Yeah. And when choosing between, I could create something that will live past me, or I could be crippled by self-doubt and imposter syndrome, I feel like it makes it a whole lot easier to say, all right, I'm gonna get over these fears and insecurities and do this.
So Chandler, what if you're a young adult and you don't have a lot of life experience, or you don't have a lot of experience in an industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I wrote my first book when I was 19 years old. And so I was that young adult, right? I was fresh out of college, and by fresh out of college, I mean I was dropping out of college. and but I had focused on one thing, and like even it was just for a summer. Like I had ran a successful painting company through a company called Student Painters. Yeah. Internship, and so I was number one in the country, number one in the company in my first year. And then I came back and trained a few guys. And so then I just wrote a book on that. And it was, hey, what are the things that I learned the hard way about productivity for entrepreneurs? And I had a couple of people in mind in my friend network that like, there were a lot of entrepreneurs and like they would struggle with a couple key things. And so it started out like, hey, I'm just going to write like this PDF and send it to them to be helpful. And then it evolved into, oh man, hey, what if we just put this on Amazon and just see what happens? And then I don't like doing anything halfway. So it's like, all right, cool. Let's just send it and go for it and just see what happens for like a couple weeks. Like, really get after it with marketing this thing. And then it started catching fire and it started getting reviews and it started making money and all that stuff. And so I would say, you know more than you think. And for me personally, like at 19 years old, I definitely thought that. It's like, man, who's going to listen to me? 19 years old and a college dropout, you know? But I really do think that there's a lot of times people, they don't relate to the Tony Robbins of the world or the Seth Godins of the world or whatever, but they would relate to you. Like they would relate to the person listening to this or the person watching this that's thinking about doing that thing. And so that's kind of how I help myself get through it. It's like, hey, they might relate to me because I'm Southern. They might relate to me because I'm young. They might and they might read my book when they wouldn't read any like big time authors books. Cause they're like, oh, cool. That's like too far-fetched for me, but reading someone that they can relate to, or maybe it's even just your family. Like you can create life change, life's changed in your family through the process of doing it. So that's the thing for me. And then if at the end of the day, like you just totally feel like I have zero experience, I've never done anything ever, which I don't even know how that's possible. But if you truly reach that point, then go do something. Like start going through your guys' training programs, like start learning a skill and say, all right, I'm going to spend 6 months. I'm going to spend 9 months mastering a skill, and I'm going to focus like a laser. And I'm not going to go a mile wide and an inch deep, but I'm going to go an inch wide and a mile deep on this one thing. And then chances are when you go down that path, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, however long after that, you're going to have pulled together enough experience to write a book on that thing.
Yeah. And win or lose, you're going to have something to write about, some kind of story.
Yeah. 100%.
So when should something be a lead magnet versus a book? I mean, what point is it big enough and crystallized enough that it can be a book? Because you've written 6 or 7 best-selling books now, right? Yeah.
So the ideal length of a book is between 15 and 40,000 words typically. But I would say, Stephen Covey began with the end in mind. So my first book was like, I want to say like 12 to 14,000 words, which is tiny. I mean, it's basically a pamphlet at that point. Like I got shipped the physical copy of the book for the first time, and I just laughed. I laughed because it's like that's this, it's like that thick, but it serves the purpose. Like, okay, this is a book on productivity for entrepreneurs. Well, what's the last thing they have time to do? Read a book. So let's make it short. So we reposition it as a selling point. And it was the no BS productivity for entrepreneurs guide. Right. And so, there's no exact science, but I encourage you to, at a minimum, sell it. And if nothing else, it'll make it more powerful when you give it away, because then it has inherent value. And like we give away the audiobook all the time, and that has inherent value. And that converts like crazy because people are like, oh, wow, I would pay $15-$20 for this audiobook. Chandler's giving it to me for free. I like this guy already. Our relationship's off to a good start.
That is so smart. Guys, you should listen to what Chandler said. There is so much perceived power in having an asset like that, like a book, especially if it's wieldy. Check this out. Have you seen this? This is our master presentation.
Wow, that's awesome.
Volume 1 of 3. And when you bring this to a meeting or you show this to people and how thick it is, people, they just immediately like, uncle, okay, not going to try to challenge you. I brought this thing into meetings, and that's what closes deals.
I believe that. Yeah. That's awesome.
So tell me, how should an author be thinking about building their personal brand? Yeah. Like, what are the right ways and wrong ways to do it?
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. Like, I feel like I haven't done an amazing job of building my I feel like I've done a good job of building my personal brand, but it was never by focusing on building a personal brand.
Exactly.
Really. Like, it was like, don't do all the BS quacky stuff that people say. Like, focus on adding value and focus on like really fundamentals. And so for me, it was always like, hey, how do I tie this in with some sort of economic engine and like use this thing to generate revenue for my business? And in doing so, there's going to be more velocity behind what I'm doing. And so in the early days, it was kind of way more like, for me, I would not use a pen name because I want my name to be on it. So like that's maybe an intentional thing. that I've done, but like, there's a bunch of things like I have traditionally not focused. Like if there's,
You have an amazing real name. If I was Chandler Bolt, I would use that all day.
Thank you. So I think there's kind of like, there's the direct response camp and then there's the branding camp. And I think I've always been way more in the direct response camp, which I think is really good early on. But then as we've grown as an organization with self-publishing school, like one of the things I've had to realize is like, okay, I feel like there was a time where our brand was really weak. Like we just weren't intentionally, because it was the B word. Branding is like, okay, cool. Let's talk about a bunch of other things that don't matter, right? Like that's how I looked at it. And so now it's like, I think we're being more intentional about it, and we're improving the quality of design, and we're, like making things just better as a whole. And so I've tried to be more intentional about it. And then maybe one specific thing is like, it was what Chandler Bolt was way more out front in the early days. And as we've kind of grown, I've been more intentional about pulling myself back, and I'm still sure like the face of the company, but I feel like I learned this early on from digital marketer and Ryan Dice. It was the Ryan Dice show. And then they intentionally moved it to digital marketer. And that was what set up that's what allowed him to pull back, and also for them to build a business, not a name and a face. And so if you just do the personal brand thing, like I think the personal brand thing is super important. And like, there's a reason why I'm so intentional about including myself in self-publishing school, because I want to be able to, for future businesses, like bring my personal brand to the table. And that will be a good portion of my equity, kind of like Tim Ferriss or somebody else would bring that to the deal. And then that's what you're paying for. Whereas previously it was all sweat equity. So I was just the guy who's like, cool, I'll do all the work. But it's like, I feel like in building your personal brand, you earn the right to do less, and you're bringing that personal brand to the table. But at the same time, if you make it the thing, well, then now all of a sudden I can't get out of this business. So I've built myself a job. I haven't built a sellable business. And so it's always been that little bit, I feel like a little bit of a dance.
Yeah. So talk about some of those steps and going from a hustling personal brand where you're doing a lot of the work to scaling into a company brand where it's not your face there all the time, but you've got teams and processes. So you get the work off of you. We got a lot of entrepreneurs where they're successful, but now they're trying to scale their business. Yeah.
So this is what I'm really passionate about. And a lot of my friends know me as kind of like the operator guy or the integrator guy, where there's like a lot of visionary entrepreneurs. Not many people focus on operations systems, all that stuff. So I love that. I've got I think about this, but like kind of a fun side passion project that's like my 7-Figure Principles podcast and the 7-Figure Principles show. But like the goal there was and is to like create teaching, like videos, podcasts, whatever, on the biggest problems that people face as they scale. So like business and life principles kind of. And what I started doing is I took, the questions that my entrepreneurs buddies would ask me, and I would add them to my phone to a backlog. And then the questions that my employees would ask me, and I'd add them to that same backlog. And then I started recording videos. So now all of a sudden, whenever people ask me a question, like I want to be helpful, but it's a way for me to scale and leverage that. Is like, it's to develop employees, and it's to help my entrepreneur friends. And so I just like, oh, how do you run a company book club? It's like, oh, cool. Let me send you that video. How do you hire your first employee? Let me send you that video. How do you hire an assistant? How do you hire your first salesperson? How do you create a job scorecard? How do you set up KPIs? Like, how do you run your meetings? To that?
Like, I want to learn too.
Cool. Oh, it's all free. I mean, it's the 7-Figure Principles podcast. Anywhere they have podcasts, and then the 7-Figure Principles show, which is a YouTube channel. And it's a labor of love, man. It's fun. And so you can find those two there, but like, I really think and so that's like a lot of the micro content I teach in those videos, audio, stuff like that. But I think it comes down to a few things, because scaling a business is hard. I mean, you've got to learn a fundamental set of skills, and you've got to go from individual performer to team leader. Yeah. You go from, I am personally productive to I am achieving goals through others. Mm-hmm. And so I think it really comes down to a few things. It's systems, rhythms, and KPIs. And so it's like, I've got a set of systems or standard operating procedures, SOPs. We call it a playbook. And so, we've got a playbook. then there's the rhythms. So what are the accountability rhythms? What are the meeting rhythms? Like, what does that look like? And then KPIs, key performance indicators. Does everyone in the company have a KPI or top 3? And so do they know whether they're winning or losing, right? And whether they're, had a good day or had a good week or had a bad week. And so like, I think it comes down to that. And then really above all that is really great people. And it's kind of that in itself is a little bit of a chicken or the egg. Like, if you have good systems, you have good rhythms, you have good KPIs, then you're going to attract great people and retain and develop that talent. And so like, that's kind of so I'm super intentional about how we hire and like who we hire. And then also super intentional, like, how do we make sure that we develop that talent and help? Cause I think people come to work at self-publishing school, like, cause they want to be their best. And they're looking to me, and they're looking just like a lot of people come work for you, Dennis. It's like that exact same thing, right? They're looking to you to help them be their personal best. And because of the systems that you have, and because of the training that you have, and because of the mentorship and like the things that you can plug them into, you can make that possible for them. And so I think like we definitely see eye to eye on that, and are focusing on a lot of the same things, which is like, that's how you build true true wealth and a true long-lasting company that will live long after you. Yeah.
So talk more about that, because I think that's the nugget here, is that when you have knowledge, you systematize it, people can go through it, you have a process around it, you have your rhythms and KPIs. What are some of the things that you do in developing people, process, and systems at the same time? Like more on that. Because that's the stuff we don't hear much. A lot of people are talking about like a gimmick, some kind of trick, instead of strategy of building their own engine for their business.
Yeah, it comes down to leadership, growing and developing as leader. It comes down to, it's just the boring fundamentals. It's like, okay, when I'm hiring, do I have a job scorecard before I hire? Like we don't hire without a job scorecard. Yeah. Do I have one-on-one rhythms, meeting rhythms? Do I have daily huddles? Do I have KPIs? Am I doing, quarterly offsites? Like we do a book club. And so like that helps train and grow, but it's like companies will rise and fall to your level of leadership. And so I think developing yourself as a leader and then developing the leaders in your company is one of the most important things that you can be doing. And so for me, I'm constantly focused on how do I get better as a leader? And how do I develop the leaders in my company? And so that leadership went from this thing that I'm like, oh, cool, let's talk about a bunch of other stuff that doesn't matter. Yeah. Like this airy-fairy, okay, what does that mean, leadership? Yeah. Like I can think management, but like leadership, what does that mean? To like, it really has evolved into just, it's a weird thing, man. It's like, I feel like it's the infinite game, and it's what makes it so fun. It's like, there will always be ways that you can learn and grow. So I find myself coming back to like, okay, what does the team need? Like what's happening, and you kind of just start observing, and you start getting this sense for like, okay, I see where there's a bottleneck here, or I see there's, we're getting stress tested over here, or like the team as a whole is like getting disjointed and frustrated. So like, how do we come in the offsite? And like, we just did this like a month ago, virtual offsite. And it was like, we opened up with like, what's the number one thing that you're most worried about over the next 90 days? And then what's one thing that you appreciate about somebody else on the team? So it's like automatically walls are coming down, people are rebuilding connections, and we're able to say, okay, guys, let's remember, like, this is why we're in this. And this is like, this is what's going to help us win, is like our personal relationships and how we care for our customers. So like,
incredible.
Let's pull all this stuff. So I think that's, it's a bunch of those things, and learning, improving as a leader.
So what about entrepreneurs, such as in our program, where it's just them? Maybe they have a virtual assistant, or they have some freelancers, and they want to start to build those systems and processes, and maybe hire their first person. They've never been a manager before. How did you learn how to be a manager and overcome the problem of being a one-man show and then moving towards a business?
Yeah, it was reading a ton of books and learning a lot.
Yeah, what specifically?
Yeah, and so I've got my Yeah, I'm trying to think what would be most helpful for people. Like there's a couple, like there's the specific problem stuff. Like there's definitely, I've got, videos and podcasts on like, hey, how do you hire your first person? Or like, how do you, my 3 rules for leadership, or like stuff like that. A couple books that were super helpful. Number 1 is Extreme Ownership. And so just realizing that there's no such thing as bad teams, only bad leaders. That's one of the principles in the book. And that's probably my top leadership book of all time. That and The 1 Minute Manager. It's kind of like,
Ken Blanchard. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great book, man. That's you can read that one in an hour, and it's a fable, and it's easy, it's digestible, but like those are good starting points. And then it's okay, how do you make sure that I guess another resource would be Who. It's a book called Who. It's all about hiring. So they talk about the 4 S's of hiring. So create a job scorecard, source the best candidates, select the best one, and then sell them on working for you. Because if they're any good, you're probably going to have to sell them on working for you. So the 4 S's of hiring. And just like, reading books like that, and fast failure and fast feedback loops. One of our core values at Self-Publishing School is fail fast, fail forward, fail often. So I believe that the best way to learn is to fail as fast as possible. And so I just try to learn, read, implement it, fail, and then say, okay, that didn't work. All right, let's tweak this, try this. And just keep improving, keep fixing things.
Wow. That's my second favorite F word behind food.
That's great.
Fantastic. What are some of the most common mistakes in people publishing their first book?
Oh man. Most common mistakes. I'd say not focusing on getting the rough draft done is the biggest one. Because until you finish your rough draft, nothing else matters. And so you got to focus on finishing the rough draft and getting the rough draft done. And once you get there, then you kind of start to believe that it's possible. Do you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel? Where
does selling come into that? Because you said sell it before you make it.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think for me, like I don't do that as part of the book process. I do that as part of selling anything else. And maybe that's a bit contradictory. But like what I would think of is like, okay, we teach people, think of one person like that you're going to write this book for, and then write the book specific to them. So it's kind of in a way you know what their problem is, and you're prescribing that solution in the book. And so that's what we recommend is like, think of one person, write the book to them. And then we build buzz as part of the book launch. So maybe that's kind of part of the sell then build is like, we show people behind the scenes. So it's like, hey, here working on this book. Here's the, picture of this writing session. Here's what I'm thinking for the title. Vote. What do you think? Here's what I'm thinking for the cover. Vote. What do you think? So like getting people involved in the process, that's probably more of the sell than build piece, which I know obviously you do that as well.
Yeah. What do you think about setting expectations for when people are publishing and marketing their book? Because a lot of folks, they come in and they say, I want to be a New York Times bestseller, right, by next month and sell 1 million copies. And I want to be a millionaire because if I get my book out and then I can do keynotes and I can charge $100,000 per keynote and go around like these other people. Or other people, they're doing it just to build their business, or it's just a great piece of authority, just like this. I probably told 100 people about your book here, about this one of your many books.
Yeah.
Who knows what the ROI on that is, but how do you set the right expectations for people that are getting their books out there? Yeah, how much it's going to cost, what's it going to take, what's going to happen when?
I think expectation setting is one of the most important things in anything. And so I would say you're probably not going to be a New York Times bestseller. You're probably not going to sell 1 million copies. And in fact, New York Times bestseller it's just a bad goal because it's an editorial list. So they choose who's on it. So the USA Today bestseller list and the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, those are true bestseller lists based on units sold. Right. New York Times is not. So I think that's a bad goal. But in general, I think expectation setting is super important. So we just try to be super honest with people about what's going to happen, what it's going to cost. And I think a dose of medicine now and a dose of truth now is way more valuable than having to correct that down the road.
What advice would you have for local digital marketing agencies? So they're servicing chiropractors, restaurants, plumbers, real estate agents, and they want to publish a book to be known in their community and in their field.
Oh, I would say that's one of the prime ways to do it is, and publishing a book is going to help you so much with that. So get it done and then integrate it into all your marketing. I would send copies of the book out to all of your ideal clients and use the book as a Trojan horse to get in the door and to start having a conversation. And so when I think about using a book to drive leads, sales, and referrals, like this is kind of all three in a sense. It's like you're getting to start the conversation. You're increasing the likelihood that they're going to do business with you because you're credible because you've written the book. On chiropractic marketing in XYZ town or county or state or whatever. And then referrals is you're giving them a couple copies of the book and they can give a copy to others and they can share. And that just kind of opens up so much more business.
Trojan horse. I like that for immediate authority. Killer. What questions, Chandler, do you wish people would ask you, but they don't ask? You've been asked every question, right? It's going to be hard to ask you a question.
A lot. I've been asked a lot of questions. I would say often about just scaling companies, which we talked about that, but that's fun for me. You know, I'm kind of known as the book guy. And so I talk about books all the time, but I love it when people ask me about scaling companies because that's where I kind of feel like my sweet spot is. Like, I like using books to build businesses and the build businesses part is the part that I don't get to talk about so much because I'm always talking about writing and publishing books, which I certainly enjoy doing, but it's definitely fun when people ask about scaling companies.
Do you think though that books will maybe go away, like
absolutely
yellow pages or something?
Absolutely not.
Or apps or social media.
I don't think so personally. I mean, books have been around forever since the beginning of time. Maybe they just look like tablets. But they've been around forever, and I think it's a mechanism of delivery. And if you look at stats, like physical book sales are up. And everyone's like, end of time, the Kindle is going to kill physical copies of books, and they're still selling like crazy.
Yeah, it's like toilet paper. Everyone still needs it.
Yeah, 100%.
So what do you say to? Because we look at the stats. I think Tony Robbins even said 5% of people don't go past the first page of a book. So if people are buying the book and it's on their shelf, like all the books back here, but they don't read it, is that an issue, or is that just something that it's accepted fact?
I think it is. I think it is a little bit of an issue. I think it's probably accepted fact, and also an issue is that, like, I think the stat is something like 20% of books that get started actually get read. So I think it's good for business owners who are using a book to start the conversation, because you know that the conversation doesn't end at the book. But you got to make sure that, like, you're putting the lead capture in the front of the book, like you're doing those things and using it to start a conversation. And that's how you make sure that you're setting yourself up for success and using the book to grow your business.
Yeah. So what do you say, like this book? I rarely promote books, but this is a book I actually read end to end. A lot of times people come to you and me and say, hey, can you write an endorsement for their book? And you'll read let's be honest, like I'll skim a little bit of their book and I'll say something because I know who they are, but I don't have time to sit down and read 235 pages. What do you say to situations like that when people want your endorsement of their book, but maybe you don't want to read the whole thing, or do you read the whole thing?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I'll usually say, send me a few that I can choose from if I trust the person. I don't give, if I trust the person, I know that the information that they're sharing is valuable. So I don't just give those out willy-nilly. And I usually say no or don't respond and they don't follow up. And so that's fine. But if it's someone I'm like, hey, I respect this person, I think they have some valuable things to say, I'll say, hey, send me a few options and I'll work from that. And that's how I do it.
Smart. Awesome. Chandler Bolt, everybody. This guy is the book whisperer. You need to get, well, this is my favorite book. He's got many books, but this published book is how you can go end to end in getting your book done step by step so you can actually get it done. I like how it's about published and self-publishing school too, if you want a little bit of help along the way. Chandler Bolt, it is an awesome, awesome thing. Do you have any final thoughts for our audience?
Yeah, just get started. Stop thinking about writing the book and start writing it. We've got tons of free resources that we can help. We've got book outline template generator that's helpful. We've got free content. You can get a free copy of my book published on our website. There's all kind of resources that we have to help you be successful, but just get started.
Where's the best place that people can follow you or contact you?
Yeah. Me personally, I don't have any social media except for Facebook. The company as a whole, I would say like if you want to talk with the team, go to self-publishingschool.com/apply. You can book a call with the team if you want to talk about working with us to get your book done, that sort of thing. And then we've got a ton of awesome resources on the site as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Chandler Bolt.
Dennis, thank you.